and we go to item 15, our Customer and Community Services Update, and Claudia is coming to present. And the presentation is on Nexus if you haven't already seen it. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou katoa, lovely to see you today. It's probably the first time I've presented this year, this calendar year, so we'll hope you've had a lovely start to the year so far. So this is just our quarterly update for Customer and Community Services. This is a bit of a new approach that we're trying to take to make sure that we can keep you informed of all of the mahi that's occurring in our communities. You will see more detailed information coming up in our QPR as part of the GB next week. But it does give you a little bit of some of our highlights and also some of the work that we're focusing on, and it talks about some of our next steps. So in terms of our customers, we're very, very pleased to let you know that we've continued to see some quite high growth in terms of visitation numbers, but also in terms of memberships. So what we're seeing here in our regional parks, we saw over 1 million visitors in January, and our Botanic Gardens had an increase of over 21,000 visitors in January, so very, very large numbers. In terms of our libraries, again, we've had the highest registrations since August 2020, so that's been 12,000 over the December-January summer period, and our visits for libraries have been 13% higher in December year on year, and 17% higher in January year on year. So just to give you the numbers on that, it's actually the library's visits in January were 604,000 visits. We will be giving you some more details in the QPR, but we are seeing continued upward trend in e-issues as well, so quite high digital uptakes. For our pools and leisure space, we've also had some very good growth in visitors, and for the January visit numbers, we had 759,000 visitors for January, and again, really good year-on-year growth. There's also some other significant community programs underway, and so these are just some of the highlights. So the first two with Amotai and Uptempo, though, both of those services are externally funded or funded through the Māori Outcomes Fund. And with Amotai, which is the supplier intermediary, and they support Māori and Pasifika businesses to be able to access contracts and thereby improve intergenerational wealth opportunities. They have now launched the world's first Indigenous Supplier Diversity Maturity Matrix. So basically what this means, it's a tool to help businesses understand how they can better support Māori and Pasifika businesses and therefore help manage their opportunities in this space a little bit more independently. So far for Amotai, there's now 226 buyers and over 2,000 registered businesses in this intermediary program, and that enables Māori businesses to improve their ability, and of course Pasifika businesses to improve their ability to access contracts. For Uptempo, this is a program that helps support Pasifika aiga, as in families, and individuals improve their earning potential and improve their career opportunities. We often find that Pasifika communities have greater difficulty finding higher paid employment, but have significant talent. And so what this team here does is that they work with aiga, again, they're externally funded, to help improve their opportunities for employment. And we're very, very pleased to let you know that they've had a significant increase in the salaries. For the aiga who've been affected by this, it's meant about a 20 to a 25% uplift in their salaries, which is a significant amount for these families. From a community activity standpoint, we've had a significant amount of activity in our community venues and facilities in December. They've exceeded all of our LTP targets. Our venues for hire saw 250,000 visits, 180,000 in our community facilities. That's a little bit lower, but that's typical for that time of the year. And we've also had 50,000 visitors in our partner facilities. So these are just some charts. This one here shows customer satisfaction. Because of the scale, it looks fairly flat, but we do continue to keep a really close eye on it. And very pleasingly, a lot of our community facilities' 6-month trailing averages in terms of satisfaction is starting to see a bit of a rebound since those storm events. Digital visits here, you'll also see some really good upticks in terms of digital site utilisation. In terms of our financial performance, as of February, we're very pleased to say that we've had a very good operating surplus, a combined total surplus of about $29 million, which is 8.6% positive variance of the original budget. So of that, basically, we've removed $12 million of savings already from the budget, and we've still got another 17 million positive variance. Now, of that positive variance, 3 million is attributed to revenue and 14 million is attributed to reduced spending. Our capital program is also ahead of budget, and that is because we've actually had a larger number of programs that we've now delivered since last year. We are very mindful that the capital forecasts might still end up being under budget. That is because we can have some large land transactions. That means that they can come in peaks and troughs, and there is a high degree of uncertainty. That's not a bad thing. Sometimes it's useful for us to be very prudent, and we want to make sure any land transactions are well priced. The other thing that is causing still some uncertainty is the storm recovery program. So you can see here that the major weather events caused around $56 million worth of damage to our parks and community facilities. $12 million of that was relating to operating expenses and $44 million relating to CapEx. Our teams have worked very, very hard, including with local boards, to be able to accommodate those costs within budgets where we could. And we believe that most of the OPEX can be covered and delivered by the end of this financial year, but only 14 million of the 44 million CapEx can likely be addressed in this financial year. We're currently working with the recovery unit to investigate alternative sources of funding, but primarily it may mean that we may have to prioritise the asset and the capital upgrades against the renewals that are also being put forward, in addition to making some trade-offs where we're seeing that some of those assets may not make so much sense to renew, particularly if we're concerned about future climate events. There have been, by this stage, by the end of the year, I should say, that we would have done and completed 350 landslide assessments. We're also progressing claims of the insured assets that are affected by insurance coverage, well, storm damage, The challenge that we do have, of course, is that a lot of our assets that have been affected by the storms, they don't have insurance coverage because of the types of assets that they are. So that includes tracks, for example. Some excellent delivery highlights. So you'll see there in Pukakawa, the domain, there's the band rotunda restoration. So that's a 111-year-old feature in the domain. It was built in 1913. And thanks to the support of our heritage teams, they've even used the very original colours of that band rotunda when they did that restoration work. We're also proud to say that we've reopened the Arataki Visitor Centre, which had been closed due to the storm and weather events last year. We hosted a number of Pride or Proud Centre activations during Pride Month, and we, of course, started our marae-based citizenship ceremonies, and we had our first pilot, which I believe I covered with you last time at the Hawani Waititi Marae, but we've also got further marae-based citizenship ceremonies planned in other areas coming soon. So those are really exciting ways to welcome new New Zealanders to Aotearoa. We've hosted a large number of movies and music in the parks. Our events team has delivered 51 events a year to date, and 18 of those were in January. And of those 18, 6 were music in the parks and 6 were movies in the parks. Now, one statistic I found very entertaining was that for the Barbie movie in the Clover Park in St Heliers, we had over 3,500 guests. So you can see why that was a popular flick. The events team has also supported 30 citizenship ceremonies during this time. And in Myers Park, you can see a beautiful diagram there of the incredible multi-sensory artwork that's integrated into the landscape of the Merrill Drive underpass. And that has been a combined shared effort alongside with our public art teams, but of course with the mana whenua, as well as our infrastructure and environmental services teams to help put that in place. So in terms of some key focus areas for our teams as we move forward, we're continuing to implement some of the annual budget changes that were put forward. Some of those we understand are sensitive, and we're continuing to work with people where there are questions or concerns, and we try to be as adaptive as possible, recognising of course that we do have budget constraints. We're also working and supporting the LTP implementation and the advice provision around that. We're currently still in the process of conducting our value for money reviews, and the large one that we're working on at the moment is around our pools and leisure space. And then we continue to support a number of internal improvement programs, including in our regional parks areas, because we've had a large number of visitors, and safety for our visitors and our teams continues to be a priority, just as one example. We've got a large number of other reports that are coming to a variety of committees and through workshops over the next few weeks and months. So just to give you some highlights here, we have already provided information on the regional bin optimisation as well as the seismic strengthening program, so you would have received some memos on that. Then we've had the current PEP committee update. Next week we've got the REV committee update on our full facilities contracts performance. So the full facilities maintenance contracts do a lot of the open space management work, and we regularly review those, and that information will be presented next week. The following week we will be doing our updates on the line-by-line service review of our Parks and Community Facilities Department. After that, we're going to be doing a little bit of a deep dive on our libraries, and so you can see the number of visits and some other highlights from our libraries team, and that's at the governing body on the 28th of March. Following from that, we have another memo coming on the regional CAPEX work program, followed by a regional CAPEX work program workshop in April, and that is so we can start planning for the next year. We will be providing an update on Muriwai and in May, as well as seeking your approval at this committee of the regional CAPEX work program in July. So those are just some highlights from our division, and I hope that provides you a little bit more visibility of some of the actions underway. Kia ora, thank you.
Kia ora, thank you so much, Claudia, and thank you for the just scratching the surface of the massive amount of work, the people who work with you and your teams right across Tamaki Makaurau. So that's a great snapshot, but I know looking deeper, there's so much more that you haven't put in there today. But there will be some questions where you can maybe highlight some other things. But thank you for the highlights. Councillor Ferry first, and then Councillor Watson.
Thank you. I've got two questions. We'll do the easier one first, if that's okay. So on that timeline you've got there, Claudia, I note we don't have the pools and leisure contracts, which are supposed to be coming to revenue, expenditure and value in May, and also that they're supposed to be going to local boards in the impacted local boards in April. So can I just get a bit of reassurance on the timeframes on that? I've had two of my local boards have indicated quite some concern because new contracts potentially coming in on 1st of July, not that far away.
Thank you very much for the question, Councillor, and you're absolutely right. We are planning to have a REV committee update regarding the Section 17A reviews. Yep. The timing of that is just being finalised and confirmed in terms of how we're going to conduct that process, whether or not we need to start with a workshop and then have a decision-making meeting. And so our Value for Money team is currently working on the best approach, but there most certainly will be REV committee involvement, and that will be happening quite soon. Our team is also currently preparing for local board workshops, so that is underway. You're absolutely right. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. I think we probably need to keep a close eye on that one. Some of the local boards are a bit worried, so just letting you know that. The second one, which is the hard one, is around bin removal. It's everybody's favourite topic. We love to talk rubbish around here. Ha ha. So thank you. but I know we did have the memo on the 1st of March, but there's still quite a lot of community concern, a lot of contact coming through to elected members on this, and I'd like to request, it was something that came up in a workshop discussion we had. We were actually having about something else, but members were so agitated about it that the bins came up. I'd like to request that we have a briefing for elected members that covers both local boards and governing body, and haukura members if they're keen, to just talk through what has happened, what's happening next, and what we're seeing on the ground, because I think there's quite a lot of disquiet out there. I'm aware some areas have had differing advice from others in terms of, for example, one local board's potentially looking at funding, keeping some of their bins, and other boards have been told that's not an option. So we really need to get a bit of a unified piece of information, a chance for people to ask questions. So the question is that something that you feel can be done maybe in the next month or so?
Thank you very much for the question. And I think what I'll do, if it's okay, Councillor, is I will take it offline, work with our teams to see what the best options could be, and then perhaps liaise then with our chair to understand should it come back to this committee or through another channel. Thank you.
Okay. I just note, if that's okay, I'd just note that we have some areas haven't rolled out yet, and so this is going to continue to be an issue for the next little bit, but also I suspect we're going to get a lot of feedback through the LTP about this issue when actually we're asking them about other things. So I just wanted to note that there is a bit of urgency on this one in terms of us being able to communicate about, hey, this is what's happening. Can you tell us about the other things in the LTP, please? Because the bin stuff is separate and highly operational. I want to acknowledge that, but it's becoming a bigger issue. Thanks.
And I acknowledge that. And so just to reassure you, so firstly, we're looking at the matter and we're taking it very, very seriously. So the team is working exceptionally long hours to try to help respond to queries, provide information, follow up with communities where concerns have been raised. We're taking a very proactive approach. It does vary, and some local boards have put forward funding, LDI funding, to be able to keep some bins. And of course, we acknowledge that some local boards haven't had the chance to roll this out yet. So we will look at how we can provide better information, noting, of course, that we've just sent out the memo, but if that's not sufficient and we need to give more information, I'll work with our teams to see how we can best do that.
Thanks. I think that just needs to be made visible, that work. That would be the first step. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Watson.
Firstly, good to hear the surge in the library patronage. Certainly, the function libraries provide increasingly, and I'm sure it's across the board here, is incredibly important one. And if there's one thing I hear from feedback from people in my community, which is quite a diverse one, is how much they value the libraries, and how more than anything, even in this long-term plan, they're concerned that that position of the libraries is upheld. And I know some of them are always like chocker when I go on that East Coast based one in particular. There's all manner of people from so commendation to the staff in the libraries, because often they're dealing with quite big numbers of people. They're unfailingly polite and helpful, and just wonderful ambassadors for Auckland Council. So, big ups to the library staff. I just want to follow on with the one, however, Claudia, with the bin issue, and I don't know, it sort of hit certain board areas. I'm certainly starting now to getting a lot of complaints coming through from people through this long-term plan process, what they're going up to the people from council to there, and this is the top of mind. This is the one issue that is disturbing people more than others. I guess, and we have had updates in that, but as I said, it's getting bigger. And I guess the one question I would put to you is in respect of some of the, I was going to say perverse outcomes, but one of the undesirable outcomes is certainly, it's clear to me that in some places then rubbish has just been dropped or piled up, or mixed in with other stuff, and we have a kind of hygiene issue that's emerging in, excuse me, in certain locations. So I would just seek your response to what has been done by way of monitoring for areas where rubbish has just been dumped, essentially, now that the bins are gone.
So thank you very much. So firstly, thank you for the compliments to our libraries team. I'm sure they will very much value that. In terms of the bins, so there's two aspects to it. Partly, in some areas, we are observing, unfortunately, despite bins being in place, a change in public behaviour. So perhaps the one request I have is to please, if we can, encourage Aucklanders to be tidy Kiwis. Because we are seeing an increase in littering, and we are seeing that right next to bins. So regardless of the bins, we are still seeing a change in community and customer behaviour, and we do have an opportunity as Aucklanders to better look after our city, and I would encourage us to do that. The second aspect then is around the actual areas where bins have been removed, and there have been some misunderstandings. So there's been concerns raised about bins being removed when they actually haven't been removed yet. So there's some misunderstandings about where bins have gone, and some potential confusion that a bin used to exist when it may have not existed there. But of course, then where a bin has gone and it's caused concerns, that's when we're working with the communities, our elected members, or where we're seeing complaints, which we're very, very closely tracking. We then look at, well, what are the other options? Do we need to reinstate a bin, or do we have an alternative option there? So our contractors, for example, have got they've got a loose litter pickup requirement in their contracts. So these are the full facilities maintenance contracts. So there are loose litter pickup opportunities. But equally, if we see that we need to have additional bins, our teams are very open to looking at that. Most of the time, the teams have absolutely the best intent of where they've removed the bins. They've tried to use data and information and community insights as much as possible. There are, of course, a lot of them, and there will be some instances where a bin has accidentally been removed when it perhaps shouldn't have been the best bin to remove, and we then work with communities to try to see how we can reinstate it.
Okay, so thank you. So hopefully some of the local boards are picking that up. And just one quick one by way of follow-up, and it goes to that notion of loose litter pickup. There are some very good-hearted people in the community who pick up other people's rubbish, and they will pick it up because they've got somewhere to put it if they're not going to pick it up and put it in their car or taking it home with them. So I just wonder what that, we might be seeing a bit of evidence of that now already, but obviously if you're at a public place, a bin's been taken away, the kind of be a tidy Kiwi people who often do it for other people, they're going to be put off because there's no facility. So I just hope that that's made aware of too, because that's certainly a behaviour that's been a highlight, but it could be well negated under the current regime.
Thank you for your comment through the chair. If I may just perhaps add something. So this is another way that if people have concerns, how they can raise it with us. So we have an excellent system called Report a Problem. So if you go onto Google, you type in Auckland Council Report a Problem, it will come up with an electronic system by which people can log any concerns. That's around facility maintenance, litter, graffiti, all sorts of stuff. It's a great tool for us to understand where concerns exist so we can best respond to them. But yes, we very much value the feedback. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you. Councillor Dalton, Deputy Chair.
Thank you. I've got 3 questions. One was, I just wanted a reminder of where we got to with introducing a overseas visitor levy to the Botanic Gardens. Did we shelve that at that time? Because I'm just looking at the increase in visitor numbers and thinking there's a revenue opportunity there. I know it was a little contentious at the time we started talking about it, but I would support it. I think what happened, maybe there was some challenges in how operationally it would work, but perhaps it's something we can revisit. But if you could let me know, because I know that the Botanic Gardens were very supportive. In fact, I think they put the idea forward. My second question was, can you just confirm for me, you've said that Amatai and Uptempo are funded externally and through Māori outcomes. Are they confirmed in our work program over the long-term plan as work streams? Because I'd hate for us to lose those as like a council work plan, even though they could be externally funded, because they're incredible programs. And yes, I'm sorry, I'm going to talk bins too. I think that perhaps it just didn't get enough daylight in terms of the process looking back, because I know the local boards, my 2 local boards, had a spreadsheet that listed every bin that was going to be removed. They were asked, do these look okay to you? And they gave feedback. So there was really, and this was months ago. Also, it was in the annual plan for consultation, so we all knew that this was a delegation to the CEO that the bin removal could take place. And then it rightly went through local boards to discuss. My 2 local boards have decided to fund, to hold on to the bins, and I don't know that that's the best strategic outcome when we have a look at our waste management plan that we're trying to do. And I'm losing the going into a debate now instead of questions. So my question was going to be, what information did the local boards think was missing? Did they have the information that said how often the bin is emptied? Because from what I understand, the bins recommended for removal are the ones that had no rubbish in it when contractors went to empty them, or had little rubbish in it when contractors went to empty them. So what information did the boards think that they were missing?
So thank you very much, Councillor, for your question. So I'll just start with overseas visitor levy. I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that, so I'll have to come back to you. Thank you. In terms of Amotai and Uptempo, so yes, my understanding is that they're all continuing as part of the long-term plan proposal, and we're very grateful for your feedback. They do excellent work. In terms of the bins, so yes, you're right in terms of we believed that everyone had received the information that they needed to be able to help inform those decisions. We have now received feedback from some local boards that they may have not either received an email, had the opportunity to perhaps understand all of the information that they now think could have been more helpful to them. But when we do get that feedback, we then try to work with them to rectify that. So I know our teams worked very, very hard to give people the information that they needed in the timeframes that we had available, so that we could give full visibility and transparency on the process. It is a lot of information, and so sometimes information may get lost, or perhaps we could have improved our clarity. So where we can learn from those issues, we try to learn from those issues. And in terms of the info provided to them, so yes, when we made the recommendations around the bins, there were a number of factors that informed those recommendations. So would be information around how often they needed to be emptied, the proximity to another bin, whether or not a park was in high utilisation or not, whether or not it would have peak periods such as the summertime, when we would typically see more visitor numbers to a specific site. So there's a lot of factors that influence those recommendations. Where available, we would also try to use sensor information, because the bin sensor information of how often, how full or empty it would be could also be useful. Information is not perfect, and so we would have to try to provide the information with the best information that we had at the time, and then we would try to sense check that information via local boards to understand, does that bin make sense for us to remove? And if we got feedback that it didn't or wouldn't, then we would try to look at an alternative option. But we do recognise that it's a lot of work, that information can sometimes perhaps not be as clear as it should be, and so we do try very hard to rectify that where we recognise and understand those gaps.
Thanks, Claudia.
Kia ora, thank you. Member Ashby.
Kia ora. Thank you for the excellent presentation. It's obviously a busy but fruitful time. 2 questions from me. you mentioned in terms of park and community facilities, there was the OPEX we'd be able to do, but there was going to be a significant hole in the CAPEX from the storm damage and the insurance gap in some of those assets. And yeah, your point around asset renewals and resilience, obviously there's a piece of work there. My question's really, you know, the long-term plan's coming up, and Aucklanders are going to vote on, you know, what they care about, what they want to invest in, and that's going to be an element of how deeply they put their hand in their pocket. But a big part of that is around our natural environment, which looking after that. So I guess the question around this CAPEX hole is that going to mean the closure of those facilities, or and that might be tracks as well, or are we going to run them further into the ground because we can't fix up the infrastructure needed to keep the environment safe? So that's one question. Maybe I'll save my next question for after that one, if you don't mind.
No problem, member. Thank you for the question. So it's actually a very big question. It's quite a complex answer. I'm afraid we can't simplify it too much because it very much depends on each asset. So what's been damaged gets assessed, and then we look at, well, what are the alternatives? Sometimes it could require just a quick fix, an easy fix. Sometimes it's much more complex and requires engineering. And if the engineering, for example, is needed from a safety standpoint, then that's a really important consideration. And sometimes if the engineering may be needed, but we're concerned about future weather events, for example, in the coastal areas, then it may make sense not to perhaps invest in that engineering there, but rather to invest the engineering elsewhere, where we've got greater certainty about future use. So it's not a simple answer. It has to be assessed on an asset-by-asset level. So when we looked at the number of assets we've assessed, of the over 300, we've had to really understand what the options are for some of them. So for some of them, you may see a difference in how those assets are repaired. So maybe it's a smaller fix. We try not to let assets run into the ground, especially for assets that are frequently used. You will, however, see in the LTP that there is a recommendation, less perhaps on the open space side, but more on the facility space side, that we spend less of a time investing all of the money into the facilities, but more being able to invest in services over time. And so what we're recommending there is that there is a bit of a shift in how we deliver. And we're aiming to deliver differently through digital services, via partnerships, or by the consolidation of services into a smaller asset footprint, like we're seeing with our libraries and service centres, for example. What that then does is that maximises the asset utilisation and allows us to then reinvest that money into other areas that may be a higher priority by being able to deliver differently. So it's quite a complex question. I hope I've been able to answer it okay.
Yeah, sorry, it is a massive question, so I've really put you on the spot there. I guess I'm just looking for some assurance, and maybe it's something we can have a conversation offline about, but that some of these assets are still going to get the same numbers of visitors, and the infrastructure may have been degraded from the storms, and are we just, to use a practical example like a track, because we've got unfortunately a lot of experience in that, as Ken knows, but are we just, you know, putting a sticking plaster over it to keep it open, or are we doing what is required to protect the values that we need to protect, the natural values, for example? Anyway, I think that's probably an offline conversation. My second question was, I was really interested in the citizenship ceremonies taking place at Marae. I think that's a really cool initiative and should be supported. But I do have a question just in terms of the process of that, because when people are coming into a rohi and undertaking to be citizens, there's a tikanga role that ideally really sits at least being informed by iwi, the mana whenua, because they're manahiri coming into a rohi, and I wasn't aware of that process to take place on a sort of urban marae, which I'm supportive of, but I don't understand the process and the decision making that, I guess the policy for this, because my point, I guess, is that there should be a policy, and that policy should include engagement with iwi. So could you just clarify that one for me, please?
So thank you very much for the question. So I'd have to perhaps get a little bit more details to confirm this with our teams, but my understanding is that we work very closely with the marae to do this mahi. So this is not something that we impose on marae, but rather it is supported by the marae, and it's part of a pilot program to understand how do we roll it out. Is it working well for marae? Is it following tikanga practice and those other really important aspects as well?
I guess my point is, so the example you used is not an iwi marae, it's a mātāwaka or pan-tribal marae, but, and there's not an issue with that. The question is, when citizens are coming into the rohi, it's not the rohi of that marae, it's the rohi of the iwi, and so there's tikanga, there's an element of tikanga that sounds like it's been missed, or could have been missed, and I'm just, again, maybe it's a follow-up conversation, but I'd just like some clarity around the policy of how this is done to make sure that everyone's on the same page when it happens, and that there isn't an unintended consequence of maraes and iwi at odds.
It is very valuable feedback, and I will certainly come back to you with more information. Thank you.
Kia ora. Councillor Turner.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick ones. Thank you for everything, like everyone else says. The budget, when I saw one of the slides up there, you were showing a walking path on top of a maunga, I thought. So, here you go back quite a bit. Keep going, keep going, keep going. That's, yeah, okay. So so all it made me think of is where the budgets all come from. That's what makes this unclear too. CF delivers so much stuff, but then pick the budget for that out of so many different pots. It becomes unclear of exactly where the savings or so, I knew that you delivered this stuff on behalf of the Maunga Authority and what they wanted, but, is the cost that coming out of their budget? It's really not that I'm worried if it is or it isn't. It's about understanding, like how much of the neta gets used for this, how much of this, how much of that. That's the other half of the picture, which is quite unclear and makes it complicated. So just a feedback on that. And the other question was, report a problem. Can it be, taking aside the fact that I think this outcome-based stuff is not good compared to proper rotational maintenance, but I have been trying to use report a problem, and the second biggest problem after trying to log on all the time is that it often comes back and says that your job has been deleted because someone else has complained, or because they've received a second complaint. Surely stacking those complaints would let staff know where there's, that would kind of prioritise the issue as you saw more and more complaints for the same. So can you make it so that the preceding complaint doesn't get knocked off as soon as another one arrives?
So thank you for the question. So I'm not familiar with that aspect of report a problem, but what I'll do is, so report a problem is managed by a digital team and digital and customer experience. So it's a different team than customer and community services. So what I'll do is I'll talk to the team there and see if we can provide some updates, because I know that there's improvement programs that have been planned and will continue to be planned for these digital systems. So what we can do is we can find out where that program is in terms of its improvement to make sure that we're being as easy and as effective for customers. In terms of logging in, I'm not too sure you need to log in. I've never had to log in, and I use it all the time.
You need to log in if you want to trace that complaint.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, and so I logged in on my council email address and it told me go away.
I'll raise that feedback with the digital team. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. Just two quick ones. One, of course, is about bins. I think it's about the 8th or 9th time we've talked about it, but the community are really upset, man. So were we to, through the LTP process, look at adjusting the bins, maybe putting some of them back? Can we easily do that? Are they available sitting in a warehouse somewhere?
We can put bins back. It does come with a multi-million-dollar price tag if we were to revert them all. That was the reason why it was put forward as part of the annual budget for a cost saving. But there are opportunities to put bins back. Perhaps in terms of, though, how we factor that into the LTP, because there are some very big proposals in the LTP, and it would be a shame to, for the bin conversation, to perhaps detract from seeking community input on the bigger matters that are being proposed. So what I'll have a bit of a chat to our LTP team and our Parks and Community Facilities team to see how we can provide some clarity on that, just so that we can minimise perhaps the distraction of this on some of the really big LTP questions that we're seeking community input on. Thanks.
I think that should be maybe part of the future workshop that we were discussing, but also, it's something that a lot of people feel really strongly about. So I wouldn't necessarily classify it as distraction, although we want to talk about some of the bigger issues too, right? Okay, second and final question, thank you, Chair. In relation to the value for money work on swimming pool operations, just wanted to confirm that you're assessing the possibility of insourcing the operations as well as outsourcing them and actually providing direct provision as opposed to just contracting.
Currently, we have a mixed model, so about 50% of our pools are managed in-house and 50% are outsourced. What we're doing is we're assessing multiple options in terms of the value for money. I have to be very careful about how I share this publicly because of the commercial nature of this and where we're currently progressing through this work. So if it's okay, I'd need to leave some of those details.
I understand. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Claudia. My concerns about bins I won't get into either, but I guess for me, during that time when we had a $325 million hole and there was a bunch, this was one of the many on the list that didn't get consulted on because pre-consultation there was a big long list delegated to CEO. So I guess if we had been able to have a proper conversation, this is my view, not a question, I guess that the concerns maybe that are popping up, I'm worried that you guys are spending more time and money on this issue than the saving, but I'll put that aside. There are clearly were bins that I agree, middle of nowhere or double ups or down the bottom of a 1 kilometre track, sure, but there are some, in my opinion, that seem to be not optimal. So it would be good to discuss what that is. Just on our regional parks, so 20 years we've had no bins at all in our regional parks. That could have been helpful to put out there during this process. Is it correct that we still have, the least litter anywhere in our regional parks, even without bins? Are we still seeing really low levels of rubbish in those parks despite having no bins?
That's a good question. So we did, in some of our commentary, refer to the regional parks changes. We also received acknowledgement from a number of elected members during that time that that program had been very successful and there was a degree of encouragement around learning from that regional parks model because it does seem to work. But in terms of giving you the actual details and facts now about loose litter pickup there vis-a-vis other areas, I would need to follow up with you, I'm afraid, because I don't have those statistics at hand.
Thank you. And I know I've discussed this separately with the team before, but the two items going to Rev Committee, the leisure centres, which I'm quite passionate about, considering we've got some fantastic council-owned and run leisure centres in my ward. But is that only going to be considered as a revenue expenditure item, or will it come to us for a broader discussion on, it's not, to me, just about cost. There are plenty of other good reasons why you may or may not have council run. Is that coming for a decision for all of us, or is that still believed to be a revenue and expenditure only decision? And same on the Parks and Community Facilities Financial and Service Review Workshop. I'm a bit concerned if there are quite big changes that are strategy, policy, and have effects like the bins, don't come for a discussion with the whole council. I'm not on the Rev committee, so what the expectation there is to change.
Thank you, Chair. So my understanding is that the Rev Committee has the delegations for reviewing and making decisions on those pieces of work. In terms of how that may work, if that were to change, how that were to change, I would need to seek some advice, so I can perhaps take that offline with you and Megan to see if we need to provide some feedback.
Okay, yeah, I mean, maybe it comes to Budget Committee after Rev. I just think those significant decisions should be made by all of us, not a smaller group. But it depends on what they are. I have not seen a list or anything, so that's good. And I've got some other questions, but I think we've exhausted you enough, so I can ask them offline. But just want to acknowledge your team for all the work out there, and hope you pass on our thanks from committee. That's pretty hard to all the different areas you work across, but thanks again, and we will have you more often to the committee this year, because we hopefully won't be distracted by the significant amount of things with the storm and other issues last year that hampered a lot of the normal work that you're all doing. So kia ora and thank you. Right, want to move this? Councillor Dalton, Member Ashbury second. All those in favour? Anyone opposed? No. Thank you. And we'll go to item 15, although it says... All right, 16. The summary of Planning, Environment and Parks Committee information memos and briefings. I don't think there's any questions. Pretty straightforward. Councillor Dalton will move. Councillor Ferry to second. All those in favour? Any opposed? No. There are no extraordinary items, and this is all. Unahia, unahia, unahia. Ke urutapu nui. Ke wātia, ke mama, te nākau, te tinana, me te wairoa, e te ara takatū, koia rā I rongo, whaka airia, ake ki ronga, ke tina. Haumie, huie, tai kie. Kia ora and thank you everyone, and I hope you have a good afternoon, and thank you to the staff team.